The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and something deeper, the quiet resignation of a life winding down. Marcus Webb sat beside his dying neighbor, a man he'd spoken to maybe 3 times in the 8 months since moving into the apartment complex. But when the old man, Henry Caldwell, had asked the hospital to call him specifically, Marcus came. He always came when someone needed him. That's what Marines did. Henry's breathing rattled like wind through broken shutters. His eyes, clouded with age and morphine, fixed on Marcus with unexpected clarity. "You're the one," Henry whispered, each word a labor. "The one who brings in groceries for Mrs. Chun, who helped Rodriguez fix his truck." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the plastic chair. "Just being neighborly, sir." "Neighborly?" Henry's cracked lips attempted a smile. "Your family doesn't think so. I heard them. Through the walls. The things they said to you." Marcus's jaw tightened. The walls in that complex were paper thin. Everyone had heard his ex-wife screaming about the divorce, his sister calling him a burden, his brother saying he should have stayed overseas if he was going to come back, broken. "They don't understand," Marcus said quietly, though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. Henry's weathered hand reached toward the bedside table, trembling with effort. Marcus helped him retrieve a manila envelope, its edges soft with age. "I have a place," Henry said. "Montana. High country. Been sealed since 1982. Haven't been back since." His voice drifted, pulled by memory. "Since the night I had to leave." Marcus frowned. "Mr. Caldwell, I don't." "Listen." The old man's grip tightened with surprising strength. "I have no children. No one who cared enough to visit me here except you. That cabin, that land, it's yours now. Everything inside it." "Sir, I can't accept." "You already have." Henry pressed the envelope into Marcus's hands. "Deeds in there. Transferred yesterday. Lawyer witnessed it. It's done." Marcus stared at the envelope, feeling its weight. "Why me?" Henry's eyes grew distant, seeing something Marcus couldn't. "Because you know what it means to be thrown away by the people who should have protected you. And because—" He paused, breath catching. "Because you have a good dog. I've seen you with him. A man with a dog like that. Loyal, steady. That's a man who understands what matters." Marcus thought of Sargent, his German shepherd, waiting back at the apartment. The dog who'd served 3 deployments with him, who'd pulled him from a burning vehicle in Kandahar, who slept across his doorway every night as if still guarding him from threats that no longer existed. "The cabin's been locked for 40 years, Henry continued, voice weakening. "Nobody knows what's inside except me. And now you." His eyes locked onto Marcus's face with sudden intensity. "When you find it, and your dog will help you find it, promise me something." "What?" "Don't let them take it. Don't let the vultures circle. What's hidden there? It was meant for someone who'd protect it. Someone who'd understand." Henry's breathing grew more labored. "They'll come. They always come when they smell money. But you're a Marine. You know how to hold ground. Mr. Caldwell, promise me." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a weight settling that he couldn't name. "I promise." Henry smiled then, a real smile, peaceful. "Good. There's a letter in the envelope. Read it when you get there. Not before. The cabin will tell you the rest." The old man's eyes closed. His breathing steadied into the rhythm of sleep or something beyond it. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression telling Marcus everything. He stood slowly, envelope clutched in his hands, and looked down at Henry Caldwell one last time. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, "for seeing me." He walked out of that hospital into the cold Denver evening, the envelope feeling heavier with each step. His phone buzzed almost immediately. From Jennifer, ex-wife. "Your half of the furniture sale is $340. That's all you're getting. Don't bother asking for more." Another message followed. From David, brother. "Mom says you didn't call her on her birthday. Real nice, Marcus. We all know you're struggling, but that's no excuse to forget family." Marcus deleted both messages without responding. He'd called his mother. She hadn't answered, but nobody wanted to hear that truth. Back at the cramped apartment, Sargent greeted him at the door with the steady calm that had kept Marcus alive through more dark nights than he could count. The dog's brown eyes studied him, reading something in Marcus's face. "We might have a way out, buddy," Marcus murmured, scratching behind Sargent's ears. "Old man left us a cabin. Montana. Middle of nowhere." Sargent's tail moved once, measured, thoughtful. Marcus opened the envelope. The deed was simple, straightforward. 160 acres. A cabin described as single structure, log construction, approximately 1,200 square feet. Mineral rights included. No mortgage. No liens. Free and clear. The letter beneath the deed was written in shaking handwriting, but the words were deliberate. Marcus, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't mourn me. I've lived longer than I deserved. The cabin was my refuge during the Cold War years. I worked for people who dealt in secrets, the kind that get buried, not filed. When I learned what they were really doing, I had to disappear. Fast. What I took with me to that cabin was insurance. Proof. Evidence. And something more valuable than any of us understood at the time. I sealed it in 1982 and never went back. Too dangerous. Too many eyes watching. But 40 years is a long time. The men who hunted me are dead now. Their children don't even know what they were looking for. You'll find it. Or rather, your dog will. German shepherds, they sense things we can't. Vibrations. Air currents. Changes in pressure. When he starts acting strange, pay attention. Inside the cabin is another letter. More detailed. Follow its instructions exactly. And Marcus, when your family learns what you have, they'll come for it. They'll say it's rightfully theirs, that you're not stable enough to handle it, that you need their help. Don't believe them. You earned this through simple human decency. That's rarer than gold. Protect what you find. It was meant for someone like you. Henry. Marcus read the letter 3 times, his heart beating faster with each pass. Sergeant pressed against his leg, warm and solid. What do you think, boy? Marcus asked quietly. Montana? Fresh start. The dog's ears perked forward. Alert. Ready. Marcus looked around the apartment. Bare walls. Donated furniture. Everything he owned fit in 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. His ex-wife had taken the house, the savings, the life they'd built. His family had made it clear he was an embarrassment, a decorated combat veteran who couldn't hold a job, couldn't sleep through the night, couldn't be the son and brother they wanted. He pulled out his phone and texted his sister. I'm leaving Denver. Don't look for me. Her response came within seconds. Good. Maybe some distance will help you figure your life out. We're tired of watching you self-destruct. Marcus powered off the phone. Pack light, Sergeant, he said softly. We're going home. The dog's tail swept once across the floor, and in that moment, Marcus understood what Henry Caldwell had seen in him. Not broken, not weak, just loyal to the wrong people for too long. Montana was waiting, and whatever Henry had sealed in that cabin 4 decades ago was about to see daylight for the first time. Marcus Webb and Sergeant loaded the truck 3 days later. It wasn't much. 2 duffel bags of clothes, a box of military memorabilia Marcus couldn't bear to throw away, Sergeant's food and gear, and a sleeping bag that had seen better days. The truck itself was a 2003 Ford Ranger with 190,000 miles and a temperamental heater, but it ran, and that was enough. The drive from Denver to northwestern Montana took 14 hours. Marcus stopped only for gas, fast food he barely tasted, and bathroom breaks where Sergeant could stretch his legs. The dog rode shotgun the entire way, watching the landscape change from high plains to foothills to the massive presence of the Rockies rising like ancient guardians. They crossed into Montana near dusk on the 2nd day. The sky opened up in a way Marcus had forgotten existed. Endless, bruised purple and gold, streaked with clouds that looked like brushstrokes from some cosmic painter. The road narrowed, winding through dense pine forests where snow still clung to shadowed hollows despite it being early April. The GPS lost signal 20 miles from the nearest town. Marcus navigated by the hand-drawn map Henry had included with the deed. Crude but functional, marking landmarks like Fallen Bridge and Lightning-Struck Pine and Creek Crossing, ford only in summer. When the sun finally set, Marcus was still driving, headlights cutting through darkness so complete it felt primordial. No streetlights, no houses, no signs of human existence except the rutted dirt road beneath his tires. Sergeant sat up straighter, nose working, ears forward. You smell it, boy, Marcus murmured. We're close. Around a final bend, the headlights caught it. A structure emerging from the tree line like something from a forgotten memory. The cabin. Marcus cut the engine and sat in sudden, complete silence. It was larger than he'd expected, built from dark logs that had weathered to near black, with a steep roof designed to shed heavy snow. The windows were boarded over with planks that had gone gray with age. The porch sagged on one side, and the front door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. But it was solid, still standing after 40 years of neglect. Marcus stepped out of the truck. The cold bit immediately, sharper than Denver, wetter, carrying the smell of pine and old snow and something else. Age, maybe. Or secrets kept too long. Sergeant jumped down and immediately began circling the clearing, nose to the ground, systematic and thorough. This was his working mode, the one Marcus had seen in Kandahar when they cleared buildings or searched for IEDs. The dog wasn't playing. He was assessing. Marcus approached the front porch slowly, boots crunching on pine needles and patches of crystallized ice. The steps groaned under his weight, but held. He tried the door. Locked. He'd expected that. The key was supposed to be hidden under the stone with the mark, whatever that meant. Marcus scanned the porch, then crouched to examine the stones that formed the cabin's foundation. Most were ordinary, river rock, granite, nothing distinctive. But near the corner, half buried in decades of accumulated dirt and pine debris, one stone showed a deliberate carving. A simple X, weathered but unmistakable. Marcus pried it loose. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow survived, was an old brass key. His hands trembled slightly as he unwrapped it. Not from cold. From the sudden reality of what he was doing, stepping into a dead man's secret, accepting an inheritance he didn't understand, cutting ties with everyone he'd ever known. No going back now, he whispered. Sergeant appeared at his elbow, pressed against his leg. Steady. Certain. Marcus stood, fitted the key into the lock, and turned. The mechanism resisted, frozen with age, then suddenly gave with a heavy click that echoed across the clearing. The door swung inward on protesting hinges. Darkness yawned beyond the threshold. Marcus pulled out his flashlight and swept the beam across the interior. Dust motes swirled in the light. The air smelled stale, trapped, like opening a tomb. But the structure was sound. Exposed beam ceiling, stone fireplace dominating one wall, a small kitchen area with an old cast-iron stove, a doorway leading to what looked like a bedroom. Furniture stood exactly as Henry had left it. A wooden table with 2 chairs, a couch covered in a sheet, bookshelves lined with volumes whose spines had faded to illegibility. Everything frozen in 1982. Marcus stepped inside. Sergeant followed, immediately alert, head swiveling, taking in every corner, every shadow. Welcome home, I guess, Marcus muttered. He spent the next hour unloading the truck and trying to make the cabin livable. The electricity was dead, probably hadn't been connected in decades, but he found oil lamps with fuel that had somehow remained usable. The fireplace still drew air. Marcus got a fire going with wood from a surprisingly well-stocked shed out back. As warmth slowly filled the space, he explored more carefully. The bedroom held a narrow bed, a dresser, and nothing else. The kitchen cabinets contained canned goods that had expired in the mid-80s. But everything was tidy, organized, as if Henry had intended to return. On the kitchen table, Marcus found another envelope, his name written across it in the same shaking handwriting. He sat down, Sergeant settling at his feet, and opened it. Marcus, if you're reading this, you made it. Good. Now listen carefully. The cabin has a secret. I sealed it before I left, made it invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. But your dog will find it. That's not luck. German shepherds were bred to detect changes in air pressure, differences in ground composition. Military dogs especially. They sense what we can't. Let him investigate. Follow his lead. When he fixates on a spot, pay attention. What's hidden beneath this cabin is worth approximately $250 million. Maybe more by now. I don't know what the market's done in 40 years. It's not money I stole. It's not blood money. It's proof. During the Cold War, certain contractors made fortunes from weapons deals that should never have been made. I was an accountant for one of them. When I discovered the extent of the fraud, the bribes, the off-book accounts, the foreign deposits, I took evidence. Ledgers, transaction records, account numbers. But I also took something else. Call it insurance, or revenge, or both. My employer kept a collection. Art, mostly, purchased with dirty money and hidden from taxes, from wives, from partners. Paintings, sculptures, rare books. All of it acquired illegally, never declared, never taxed. I took the collection. Every piece. Loaded it into trucks over 3 days while he was overseas. Brought it here. Sealed it in a vault I built myself. He couldn't report the theft. That would mean admitting it existed. So he sent private people to find me instead. Dangerous people. I've spent 40 years looking over my shoulder. But now it's yours. The evidence, the art, all of it. You can expose the fraud. Some of those companies still exist, still operate. Or you can sell the collection and finally have the security you deserve. Just remember, when word gets out, they'll come. Maybe not the original players. They're dead, but their children, their lawyers, their corporations. Your family will come too, once they learn what you have. Trust the dog. Trust yourself. And don't let anyone convince you that you don't deserve this. You do. The vault entrance is hidden beneath the floor. Let your shepherd find it. Henry. Marcus read the letter twice, his mind racing. $250 million. Evidence of Cold War-era fraud. A hidden vault. It sounded insane. Impossible. But Henry Caldwell had been many things. Marcus had learned that from the few conversations they'd had. Paranoid, yes. Secretive, absolutely. But not delusional. The old man had been sharp, careful, precise in his words. Marcus looked down at Sargent. The dog was already watching him, head tilted, waiting. You heard him, Marcus said softly. Your move, buddy. Sargent stood immediately and began working the room. Not the casual sniffing of a pet, but the methodical search pattern Marcus had watched him use hundreds of times in combat. Grid search. Systematic. Professional. The dog moved along the walls first, then the furniture, then back to the center of the room. He paused near the fireplace, sniffing intently at the stone hearth, then moved on. Not there. Marcus watched in silence, barely breathing. Sargent worked his way to the far corner where the kitchen met the main room. He stopped. His ears pricked forward. His tail went rigid. Then he began pawing at the floorboards. Marcus's heart kicked into a higher gear. He crossed the room and knelt beside the dog, running his hands over the wood. It looked identical to every other plank, weathered, darkened with age, fitted tightly together. But when Marcus pressed down, he felt it. The slightest give, the barest movement. Good boy, he whispered. Good boy, Sargent. He retrieved a pry bar from his truck and carefully worked the edge under the board. It resisted, sealed by time and perhaps deliberate construction. But slowly, with steady pressure, it began to lift. One board, then another, then three more. Beneath them, set flush with the subfloor, was a steel hatch. Military-grade, rust-spotted but intact, with a recessed handle. Marcus sat back on his heels, breathing hard. Sargent pressed against his shoulder, warm and solid. He wasn't lying. Marcus said aloud, needing to hear the words. It's real. He gripped the handle and pulled. The hatch was heavy, 60, maybe 70 pounds, but it opened with a groan of metal on metal. Cold air rushed up from below, carrying the scent of concrete and sealed spaces. Marcus shined his flashlight down. A ladder descended into darkness. He couldn't see the bottom. Sargent whined softly, not in fear, but in urgency. In readiness. Marcus looked at the dog, then at the open hatch, then back at the letter still lying on the table. $250 million. Evidence of fraud. They'll come for it. His phone, powered off since leaving Denver, sat in his duffel bag across the room. His family didn't know where he was. Nobody did except a dead man and a lawyer who'd processed paperwork without asking questions. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Webb felt something he'd almost forgotten. Not hope exactly. More like purpose. Direction. He stood, testing the ladder. It held. Stay here, Sargent, he said quietly. I'll check it out first. But when Marcus descended the first rung, Sargent immediately moved to follow. Marcus smiled despite himself. Yeah, okay. Together then. They climbed down into the darkness, the flashlight beam bouncing off concrete walls, and with each step, Marcus understood more clearly what Henry Caldwell had given him. Not just wealth, not just evidence, a chance to finally be something other than the broken veteran his family had written off. A chance to prove that loyalty, real loyalty, meant more than blood. The ladder descended 12 feet before Marcus's boots hit solid concrete. He stepped aside, and Sargent jumped the last 3 rungs, landing with the easy grace of a dog who'd done far more dangerous things. Marcus swept the flashlight beam in a slow arc. They stood in a chamber approximately 20 feet by 30 feet, with an 8-foot ceiling reinforced with steel beams. The walls were poured concrete, perfectly smooth, professional-grade work that would have required expertise and time to construct. This wasn't some hastily dug root cellar. This was engineered. Along the left wall stood metal shelving units, industrial strength, loaded with plastic storage containers. Each container was labeled with dates and cryptic codes. WTI, 1979, Q3, Dealing, 1980, H7, Zurich, 1981, primary. The right wall held something different. Wooden crates, the kind museums used for transporting delicate items, stacked 3 high and stretching the length of the chamber. Each crate bore custom stamps from decades past: Switzerland, Vienna, Hong Kong, Buenos Aires. And against the far wall, illuminated now in the flashlight's beam, stood a vault door. Not a safe, a genuine bank-style vault door, circular, with a combination lock that looked like it belonged in a heist movie. Marcus walked forward slowly, Sergeant padding beside him. The air was cool, but not damp. Henry had installed some kind of ventilation system, though Marcus couldn't see the vents in the shadows. He approached the nearest shelving unit and pulled down one of the plastic containers. Inside, sealed in archival bags, were ledgers. Dozens of them, each with dates spanning from 1967 to 1982. Marcus opened one randomly. Page after page of transactions. Wire transfers. Account numbers. Names of companies Marcus vaguely recognized. Defense contractors from the Cold War era. Amounts that made his stomach tighten. Millions. Tens of millions. All carefully recorded in Henry's precise handwriting, with notes like payment for unauthorized munitions, Guatemala, and kickback, Senator's office contract approval. Marcus closed the ledger carefully and returned it to its container. Evidence. Real evidence of corruption that had probably funded wars, toppled governments, killed people. Sergeant had moved to the wooden crates and was sniffing along their edges, tail low, focused. Marcus joined him and carefully pried open the nearest crate. Inside, wrapped in layers of archival tissue paper and foam, was a painting. Even in the poor light, Marcus could see the quality. Oil on canvas, maybe 3 feet by 4 feet, depicting a street scene with people in old-fashioned dress. The signature in the corner was illegible to him, but the frame was ornate, gold leaf, museum quality. He opened another crate. A sculpture, bronze, maybe 2 feet tall, of a dancer mid-movement. Beautiful, delicate, probably priceless. Another crate, rare books, leather-bound, titles in languages Marcus didn't speak. First editions, maybe. Collector's items worth more than most people made in a year. Sergeant barked once, sharp, drawing Marcus's attention to the vault door. Marcus approached it slowly, running his hand over the cold metal. The combination lock was old but well-maintained. 3 numbers. Standard rotation. Beside the vault, mounted on the wall, was a small metal box. Marcus opened it. Inside was a single index card with 3 numbers written in Henry's hand. 37 to 22, 9. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for the lock. This was it. Whatever Henry had considered the most valuable, the most important, would be behind this door. He dialed the combination slowly. 37 right. 22 left. 9 right. The lock clicked. The door's internal bolts disengaged with a heavy mechanical thunk. Marcus pulled. The door swung open on hinges that, despite 40 years, moved smoothly. Henry had maintained this. Recently, within the last few years before his death. Beyond the door was a smaller chamber, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with climate-controlled walls. Marcus could hear the quiet hum of equipment still running, powered by something he couldn't see. Solar, maybe, or a hidden generator. The walls were lined with display cases, and inside those cases, Marcus's breath caught. Paintings. Small ones, but even his untrained eye recognized the style, the quality. These weren't just art. These were art. Capital A. The kind that belonged in museums with guards and climate control and insurance policies worth millions. A landscape with water lilies that made Marcus think of Monet. A portrait with the stark, emotional style of Expressionism. An abstract piece that practically hummed with color and movement. And in the center case, under its own dedicated light, a small painting no larger than a sheet of paper. A woman's face, 3/4 profile, with an expression Marcus couldn't quite name. Knowing, sad, eternal. A brass placard beneath it read, "Study for Portrait of Unknown Woman, attributed to School of Vermeer, circa 1665 to 1670. Marcus stared at it. He knew enough about art to know that name. Vermeer. The Dutch master. The guy who painted girl with a pearl earring. If this was authentic, if it was really by Vermeer, or even his immediate students. He didn't want to calculate what it was worth. Sargent pressed against his leg, grounding him. Marcus backed out of the inner chamber carefully, respectfully, as if the art might disappear if he moved too quickly. He pulled the vault door closed, but didn't seal it, then climbed back up the ladder with Sargent following. In the cabin's main room, the fire had burned down to embers. Dawn was beginning to gray the spaces between the boarded windows. Marcus hadn't realized how many hours had passed. He sat heavily at the kitchen table, Sargent settling at his feet. $250 million. Henry's estimate had been conservative, Marcus suspected. With the ledgers as provenance, with the evidence to authenticate everything, the collection was probably worth more. Maybe double. And it was his. Legally his. The deed was clear. Everything on the property transferred with ownership. Marcus pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. Still powered off. Still disconnected from the world. When he turned it on, it would begin. His family would call. They'd ask where he was, what he was doing. And eventually, inevitably, they'd learn about the cabin. The deed was public record. Anyone could search for it. His ex-wife would hear about it from his mother. His brother would start asking questions. His sister would suddenly remember he existed. And when they learned what was underneath this cabin, Marcus powered the phone on. It took 3 minutes to connect to the weak signal out here. Another minute for the messages to flood in. 47 unread messages. 22 missed calls. 14 voicemails. All from family. All sent in the 3 days since he'd texted his sister that he was leaving. He didn't read them. Not yet. Instead, he sent one message to all of them in a group text. I'm in Montana. I'm safe. I have a place to stay. I need space. Please respect that. He put the phone face down on the table and waited. It rang within 30 seconds. His mother. He declined the call. It rang again. His sister. Declined. Then his brother. Declined. A text came through from his ex-wife. Montana? Are you serious? You can't just run away from your problems, Marcus. That's not how life works. We need to talk about your mental health. Sargent growled softly, sensing Marcus's tension. Another text, from his brother. Mom is worried sick. What the hell are you doing? You inherit some shack and suddenly you're too good to talk to family. Marcus's jaw tightened. They'd found out about the cabin already. Somehow. Maybe they'd been monitoring his mail. Maybe they'd called the hospital after Henry died and pressured someone for information. It didn't matter how. They knew. And now they wanted in. Marcus stood abruptly, startling Sargent. He walked to the window and peered through a crack in the boards. The clearing was empty. The forest beyond was still. Nothing moved except the wind and the pines. But they'd come. Henry had been right. They always came. Marcus returned to the table and typed one more message. I'm an adult. I'm stable. And I'm asking you to leave me alone for a while. If you can't respect that, don't contact me again. He powered off the phone before they could respond. Sargent stood and rested his chin on Marcus's knee, brown eyes steady and calm. Yeah, Marcus whispered. I know. We've got work to do. Because this cabin, this land, this impossible treasure buried beneath it, it wasn't just wealth. It was a test. Could Marcus Webb, the broken veteran his family had written off, protect something valuable? Could he stand his ground when they came for it? Could he prove that he wasn't the failure they decided he was? He looked down at Sargent, the dog who'd never doubted him, never judged him, never given up on him. We're going to secure this place, Marcus said quietly. Every entrance, every window. We're going to document everything in that vault. And we're going to find a lawyer, a good one, who specializes in inheritance law and fraud. Sargent's tail swished once across the floor. Agreement. And when they show up, because they will show up, we'll be ready. Marcus stood, squared his shoulders, and felt something he hadn't felt since before the divorce, before the nightmares, before his family made him believe he was nothing. He felt like a Marine again. The war was coming. But this time, he was choosing his ground. Marcus spent the first week turning the cabin from a sealed time capsule into a defensible position. He worked methodically, drawing on training that never quite left you even after you took off the uniform. First, reconnaissance and assessment. He walked the entire property line, 160 acres of dense forest, rocky outcroppings, and one small creek that still ran despite the early spring freeze. The cabin sat in a natural bowl, surrounded by ridges on three sides. Good defensive terrain. Limited approaches. Easy to monitor. Second, fortifications. He removed the boards from the windows, but replaced them with heavy shutters he built from lumber he found in Henry's surprisingly well-stocked shed. The shutters could be secured from inside with iron bars. He reinforced the door frame, installed new locks, heavy deadbolts that would require serious force to breach. Third, early warning systems. He strung fishing line at ankle height across the three most likely approach paths, attached to tin cans filled with pebbles. Old school but effective. He also positioned reflective markers in the trees, small squares of mirror that would catch headlight beams long before a vehicle reached the cabin. Fourth, documentation. Every evening, after physical work was done, Marcus descended into the vault with a camera and methodically photographed every item. Every ledger page, every painting, every sculpture, every crate and container. He uploaded the photos to a secure cloud server using the cabin's surprisingly functional satellite internet connection. Another piece of Henry's paranoid infrastructure that still worked. Sargent supervised everything. The dog had settled into the cabin like he'd always lived there, claiming the spot in front of the fireplace as his domain. But he also remained vigilant. Several times during that first week, Marcus woke in the middle of the night to find Sargent standing at the door, ears forward, listening to something in the forest Marcus couldn't hear. Each time, Marcus grabbed his rifle, the M4 he'd kept from his service days, properly registered and maintained, and waited. Nothing ever emerged from the trees. But Sargent's instincts were never wrong. Someone or something was watching. On the 8th day, Marcus drove 2 hours to the nearest town of any size, a place called Whitefish, population 8,000, big enough to have actual businesses and services. He needed a lawyer. The law office of Catherine Rivera occupied the second floor of a brick building on Main Street. Marcus had chosen her after an hour of research in the town's library. Former military JAG officer, 15 years of private practice specializing in estate law and fraud cases, reputation for taking on corporations that thought they were untouchable. Her office was tidy but lived in, with law books stacked on every surface and a view of the mountains through a wide window. Rivera herself was in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back, sharp eyes that assessed Marcus the moment he walked in. "Mr. Webb," she said, not rising from her desk. "You said on the phone this was urgent and unusual." "I'm listening." Marcus had prepared for this conversation. He'd rehearsed it with Sargent as his only audience. But sitting across from a real person, about to speak the truth out loud for the first time, his throat tightened. "I inherited a property," he began. "A cabin. About 80 miles from here, up in the high country. The man who left it to me, Henry Caldwell, sealed it in 1982. He died 2 weeks ago in Denver." Rivera's expression didn't change. "And there's a vault underneath the cabin. It contains approximately $250 million worth of art, rare books, and other collectibles. It also contains evidence of Cold War-era fraud involving defense contractors, ledgers, account records, transaction histories." Now Rivera's eyebrow lifted. Just slightly. "That's quite a claim." Marcus pulled a thumb drive from his jacket. "I have photographs. Complete documentation. I've cataloged everything." He placed the drive on her desk. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up and inserting it into her computer. Her eyes moved across the screen, scrolling through image after image. Her expression never changed, but her fingers tightened slightly on the mouse. After 10 minutes, she removed the drive and set it carefully on the desk between them. "Mr. Webb," she said quietly, "do you understand what you have here?" "I'm starting to. This isn't just an inheritance case. If those ledgers are authentic, if they document actual fraud involving government contracts, this has implications. Federal implications. Some of those contractors still exist. Some of them are now major corporations worth billions. I know. And the art." She glanced back at her computer screen, where one of the paintings was still visible. "If that Vermeer study is authenticated, we're talking about one of maybe 35 known works by that artist or his immediate school. It belongs in a museum." "I know that too." Rivera leaned back in her chair. "Why come to me? You could take this to a major firm. New York, Los Angeles. Somewhere with resources to handle something this complex." Marcus met her eyes. "Because I'm not looking for someone who wants a percentage. I'm looking for someone who'll help me protect it. Henry left this to me for a reason. He wanted it protected from the people who'd exploit it. I need a lawyer who understands that. And you think that's me? You're former JAG. You've sued corporations. You didn't have to advertise that on your website, but you did. That tells me you're not afraid of powerful people. He paused. And you were a captain. You understand chain of command. Orders. Doing the right thing even when it's hard. Rivera's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. You did your research. I'm good at that. She was quiet for a moment, studying him. Not the way his family had. Looking for weakness, for signs he was breaking. She was assessing him the way one soldier assessed another. Capability. Resolve. Trustworthiness. Finally, she nodded. All right. I'll take your case. But understand this. The moment word gets out about what you have, you'll be targeted. Legally, financially, personally. Your family, if they learn about this, will almost certainly contest the inheritance. They'll claim undue influence, question Henry's mental state, argue you manipulated a dying man. My family already wants me gone. This'll just give them a reason. Then we need to move fast. Rivera pulled a legal pad toward her. First, we secure the chain of custody. We need documentation proving Henry transferred the property to you legally and that he was of sound mind when he did it. Do you have the original transfer documents? Yes. And the hospital has records of his final days. He was lucid right up until the end. Good. Second, we need authentication. We bring in experts, art historians, forensic accountants, people who can verify what you have is what Henry claimed it was. That protects you from accusations of fraud down the line. How long will that take? Weeks. Maybe months. She looked up from her notes. Can you secure the property that long? Can you keep people away? Marcus thought of Sargent, of the defensible position, of the training that had kept him alive in worse situations than this. Yes. Then we start tomorrow. I'll draw up a preliminary inventory, file it with the court under seal to establish your legal claim, and begin reaching out to experts I trust. Quietly. The longer we can keep this under the radar, the better our position when it inevitably goes public. Marcus stood, extending his hand. Rivera shook it firmly. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Webb. This is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that? He thought of his ex-wife's texts, his brother's voicemails, his mother's disappointed silence. The years of being told he was broken, unstable, not good enough. I've been through ugly before, Marcus said quietly. I'm still here. Rivera nodded once. Respect. Then let's get to work. Marcus drove back to the cabin as the sun dipped below the ridgeline, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that hurt to look at. Sargent rode beside him, head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. When they rounded the final bend and the cabin came into view, Marcus immediately tensed. Tire tracks in the dirt. Fresh. Leading right up to his porch. He parked the truck at an angle that would give him cover and grabbed his rifle from the rack behind the seat. Sargent was already out, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The cabin door was closed. Nothing looked disturbed from the outside. But someone had been here. Marcus approached slowly, rifle ready, training overriding the spike of adrenaline. He cleared the porch, then entered the cabin in a quick, practiced movement. Corner, ceiling, center, corners again. Empty. But on the kitchen table, placed exactly in the center as if staged, sat a manila envelope. Marcus approached it carefully. No address. No markings. Just his name written across the front in block letters. Marcus Webb. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. We know what you have. We know who gave it to you. Henry Caldwell stole property that didn't belong to him. You are in possession of stolen goods. Return everything, and we'll consider this resolved. Refuse, and we'll take legal action that will destroy your life. You have 72 hours to respond. Contact us at the number below. At the bottom was a phone number. No name. No signature. Marcus read it twice, his jaw tightening. Sargent pressed against his leg, offering silent support. They found us, Marcus whispered. Faster than I thought. But fear wasn't what he felt. Anger, yes. Frustration, absolutely. But underneath it all was something colder, harder. The same thing that had kept him moving forward when mortars were falling and his squad was counting on him. Determination. Henry had warned him this would happen. Rivera had warned him too. But warnings didn't change the truth. Marcus Webb owned this property legally. He'd inherited it from a man who had every right to give it away. And no unsigned threatening letter was going to change that. He pulled out his phone and called Rivera's number. She answered on the second ring. "They're here," Marcus said simply. "Just left a threat on my kitchen table." Did they identify themselves? No. Anonymous. But they know about Henry. They know what's in the vault. Rivera was quiet for a moment. He could hear her typing. "Don't respond. Don't call that number. We're documenting this as intimidation and potential criminal trespass. I'll contact the county sheriff in the morning and file a report. They gave me 72 hours. Ignore it. Empty threats to force your hand. If they had a legitimate legal claim, they'd file in court, not leave anonymous notes in your kitchen." Marcus looked down at Sargent, who was watching him with those steady, knowing eyes. "What if they come back?" Marcus asked. "With more than paper? Then you defend yourself. You're within your rights." "But Marcus," her voice softened slightly, "don't give them a reason. Don't escalate. Document everything. Let them make the mistakes." "Understood." After he hung up, Marcus stood in the center of the cabin for a long moment. The fire crackled in the hearth. The wind moved through the pines outside. Everything looked peaceful, normal. But the war had begun. He walked to the window and peered out at the darkening forest. Somewhere out there, people were watching, waiting, planning their next move. "All right," Marcus said quietly to Sargent. "They want to fight. We'll give them one. But on our terms." The dog's tail swished once across the floor. Marcus secured the shutters, double-checked the locks, and loaded his rifle. Then he descended into the vault and brought up the most critical evidence. The ledgers showing the clearest fraud, the paintings most likely to be authenticated quickly. He packed them carefully in waterproof containers and hid them in a secondary location he'd already prepared, a depression in the rocks about a quarter-mile from the cabin, covered with a tarp and camouflaged with forest debris. If someone breached the cabin, if they somehow got past him and Sargent, they wouldn't find everything. When he returned to the cabin, dawn was breaking. He hadn't slept, but he didn't feel tired. He felt like he had in Kandahar. Alert, focused, alive in a way civilian life had never quite managed to replicate. Sargent dozed by the fire, one eye occasionally cracking open to check on Marcus. "Sleep while you can, boy," Marcus murmured. "Something tells me things are about to get interesting." The dog's ear flicked, but he didn't open his eyes. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the threatening letter in front of him, and began to plan. Not for retreat, not for surrender, for victory. The next 48 hours passed in tense quiet. Marcus maintained his routine, morning patrol of the property, work on improving the cabin's defenses, evening documentation of the vault's contents. But now he moved with the awareness that he was being observed. The prickle between his shoulder blades that had kept him alive overseas returned, familiar and unwelcome. Sargent sensed it too. The dog no longer relaxed completely, even by the fire. His ears tracked every sound, every shift in the wind. On the evening of the second day, headlights appeared on the access road. Marcus was ready. He'd been ready since the threatening letter arrived. He positioned himself on the porch with his rifle resting against the railing, visible but not aggressive. Sargent sat at his left side, silent and still. The vehicle was a black SUV, expensive, out of place on the rutted mountain road. It stopped 20 yards from the cabin, engine idling. The windows were tinted dark enough that Marcus couldn't see who was inside. For a long moment, nothing happened. The standoff stretched, taut as wire. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, late 50s, gray hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. He moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed, his expression neutral, almost pleasant. "Marcus Webb," he called out. Marcus didn't respond, just watched. The man smiled thinly. "I'm James Garrison. I represent the Garrison Family Trust. I believe you received our message." "I received a threatening letter on my private property," Marcus said evenly. "That was trespassing." Garrison's smile didn't waver. "A misunderstanding. We were simply trying to establish contact. May I approach? I'd like to discuss this situation like civilized people." Marcus studied him. Every instinct screamed danger. But Rivera had said to document everything, to let them make the mistakes. "You can stand where you are and talk from there," Marcus said. "My hearing's fine." Garrison's smile tightened but held. "Very well. Mr. Webb, I'll be direct. The property currently in your possession, specifically the items contained in the underground vault, were acquired by Henry Caldwell through theft. He was an employee of my father's company, and he absconded with materials that belonged to the corporation. You have proof of that. Extensive documentation, employment records, inventory lists, evidence that Mr. Caldwell removed corporate assets without authorization in 1982. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Then you should file a civil suit and let the courts sort it out. We prefer to resolve this privately. These items have sentimental value to my family. My father passed away 10 years ago, and recovering his collection would mean a great deal to his legacy. His collection of art purchased with money from illegal weapons deals, Marcus said quietly. Garrison's pleasant expression flickered. Just for a second. But enough. I have no idea what you're talking about, Garrison said carefully. Henry Caldwell kept very detailed records. Transaction logs, account numbers, wire transfer receipts. Some of them show payments to foreign governments that weren't exactly allies of the United States. Others show bribes to federal officials. All from your father's company. The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. Those records, Garrison said slowly, if they exist, would be privileged corporate documents. Possession of them would constitute espionage and theft, or whistleblowing, exposing fraud. Depends on how you look at it. Garrison took a step forward. Sergeant's growl stopped him cold, low, rumbling, unmistakable warning. The man glanced at the dog, then back at Marcus. His pleasant facade was cracking now, revealing something harder underneath. Mr. Webb, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. My family has resources, lawyers, political connections. We can make your life very difficult. We can audit your taxes, investigate your military discharge, examine every aspect of your life until we find something. And we will find something to use against you. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. You're a veteran living alone in the mountains with PTSD, recently divorced, estranged from your family. How do you think it'll look to a judge when we present evidence that you're unstable, that you've stolen valuable property and are now making wild accusations to justify keeping it? Marcus felt his grip tighten on the rifle. Breathe. Stay calm. Don't give him the reaction he wants. I think, Marcus said quietly, it'll look like a wealthy family tried to intimidate a veteran into giving up his legal inheritance. And I think a jury would be very interested in seeing those ledgers I mentioned. The ones documenting your father's fraud. Garrison's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty of those. This isn't one of them. Another long silence. The mountains seemed to hold their breath. Finally, Garrison turned back toward his SUV. But before he got in, he looked over his shoulder. We gave you a chance to do this the easy way, he said. What happens next is on you. The SUV backed down the road and disappeared into the trees. Marcus stood on the porch for a long time after the engine sounds faded. Sergeant pressed against his leg. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, from rage barely contained. They'd threatened him. Threatened to dig into his life, his service, his struggles. All the things he'd survived. All the nights he'd barely made it through. They'd weaponize it. Turn his pain into evidence of weakness. His phone rang. Rivera, I saw the headlights on the security camera I installed yesterday, she said without preamble. You okay? They came. James Garrison says his father owned the collection, that Henry stole it. Did he threaten you? Heavily implied he'd destroy my life if I didn't cooperate. Good. Rivera's voice was sharp, satisfied. That's admissible. Intimidation. Coercion. It strengthens our position. File a police report tonight. Tomorrow, I'm filing for a restraining order and requesting the court put the entire inheritance under protective order. He said they'd investigate my military service. Claim I'm unstable. Let them try. Your service record is exemplary. Your discharge was honorable. You have documented PTSD, which is not a weakness. It's a service-connected disability. Any judge who'd use that against you would be violating federal law, and I'd make sure that judge's name was in every newspaper in Montana. Marcus exhaled slowly. They're not going to stop. No, Rivera agreed. They're not. But neither are we. Go file that report. I'll see you tomorrow to begin depositions. We're going on offense, Marcus. They want to fight? We'll show them what it means to fight a Marine. After the call ended, Marcus looked down at Sergeant. The dog was watching him with those steady, knowing eyes. She's right, Marcus murmured. We don't run. We hold the line. Sergeant's tail swept once across the porch boards. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire with his rifle across his lap, staring into the flames. Sargent dozed at his feet, but even in sleep, the dog's ears twitched at every sound. Around 2 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your brother David says you're unstable. Your ex-wife says you're dangerous. Your mother says you haven't been the same since you came home. Give up the cabin while you still can. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. They'd contacted his family. Of course they had. And his family, who'd written him off, who'd told him he was broken, would happily provide ammunition. He deleted the message without responding. But the damage was done. Not to his resolve. That was harder than they understood. The damage was to whatever fragile hope he'd had that his family might, somehow, someday see him as something other than a problem to be solved. They'd chosen a side, and it wasn't his. Sargent lifted his head, sensing Marcus's distress. The dog moved closer, pressing his warm body against Marcus's leg. Just us, boy, Marcus whispered. That's all we've ever needed anyway. Outside, the Montana night was cold and crystalline. Stars burned like holes punched in black fabric. The mountains stood eternal, uncaring, patient. And in that cabin, a veteran and his dog prepared for a war neither had wanted, but both were ready to fight. Because some things were worth protecting, some battles were worth fighting, and some bonds, like the one between Marcus Webb and Sargent, were stronger than blood, stronger than wealth, stronger than anything the Garrison family could throw at them. The storm was coming, but they'd weather it together, the way they always had. The legal battle began the next morning. Rivera filed a motion for emergency protective custody of the entire estate, citing credible threats and documented intimidation. Within 48 hours, a judge granted a temporary order. Nothing could be removed from the property without court approval, and the Garrison family was formally barred from contacting Marcus. It should have been a relief. Instead, it was gasoline on a fire. James Garrison's lawyers responded by filing their own suit. Garrison Family Trust versus Marcus Webb, claiming theft of corporate property, unlawful possession of stolen goods, and demanding immediate surrender of all materials wrongfully obtained by Henry Caldwell in 1982. The local newspaper picked up the story. Veteran embroiled in inheritance dispute over alleged Cold War-era theft. Within days, it spread. Regional news. Then national. A wire service article appeared with the headline, Montana cabin hides $250 million secret, stolen art, or rightful inheritance. Marcus's phone exploded with messages. Reporters requesting interviews. Curiosity seekers wanting to know more. And worst of all, his family. His mother called 6 times in one day. When he finally answered, her voice was tight with something between concern and accusation. Marcus, I'm seeing your name in the news. Something about stolen art? What have you done? I inherited a cabin, Mom. That's all. That's not what your brother says. He says you're involved in something illegal, that you're going to get arrested. David doesn't know what he's talking about. He's worried about you. We all are. A pause. Marcus, if this cabin has valuable things in it, shouldn't that be discussed with family? Your father, God rest him, would have wanted us to handle this together. There it was. The shift from concern to claim. From worry to entitlement. The cabin was left to me, Marcus said evenly. Not to the family. To me. By someone who barely knew any of you. But we're your family. We should have a say in major decisions. You didn't want to say when I was living out of my truck. Silence. Cold and brittle. That's not fair, his mother said finally. Neither was telling me I was an embarrassment when I came home from Afghanistan with nightmares. Marcus's voice stayed level, but something sharp edged it. Neither was my brother saying I should have stayed overseas. Neither was Jennifer taking everything in the divorce because you all testified that I was unstable. Marcus, I'm not discussing this. The cabin is mine. What happens with it is my decision. If you can't accept that, then we have nothing else to talk about. He ended the call. His hands were shaking. Sargent pushed his nose into Marcus's palm, grounding him, reminding him to breathe. The text started immediately after. From David, you just hung up on Mom. Real mature. This is exactly why we worry about you. From his sister, Rachel, I don't know what's happening with you, but treating Mom like that is unacceptable. She's been through enough. From his ex-wife, Jennifer, I heard about the inheritance. Just so you know, Colorado is a community property state. You might want to review our divorce agreement. Marcus set the phone down carefully before he could throw it across the room. "They're circling," he said to Sergeant. Just like Henry said they would. The dog's eyes were steady, patient. Over the next week, things escalated. Marcus received legal documents from Jennifer's attorney, claiming the inheritance should have been disclosed during divorce proceedings and demanding a percentage. His brother David showed up unannounced, driving all the way from Denver, claiming he was checking on Marcus but really trying to talk his way into seeing the vault. Marcus met him at the property line, rifle visible on the porch behind him. "You're not welcome here," Marcus said flatly. David's expression cycled through confusion, hurt, and finally anger. "I'm your brother. You told Mom I should have died overseas instead of coming home broken. You think I forgot that? I was upset. I didn't mean." "Yeah, you did. And now you're here because you heard about money. Not because you care. Because you want your share of something you have no claim to." David's face reddened. "This is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that worries us. You're isolated up here, no support system, making enemies of your own family. You made enemies of me years ago. I'm just finally accepting it." David stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his car. Before driving away, he rolled down his window. "Garrison's lawyers contacted us," he called out. "They're offering money for testimony about your mental state. Just so you know what you're up against." Marcus watched his brother's taillights disappear down the mountain road. "Blood doesn't mean loyalty," he said quietly to Sergeant. "You've taught me that." The court hearing was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Rivera brought in experts. An art historian from the University of Montana examined the paintings via high-resolution photographs and video chat, her excitement barely contained. "That Vermeer's study needs physical authentication," she said. "But based on technique, pigment analysis from photos, and stylistic elements, I'd say there's a 70% probability it's authentic. The other pieces, the expressionist portrait, the landscape, those are definitely period-appropriate and valuable." A forensic accountant spent 2 days in the vault examining ledgers. His report was damning. These records document systematic fraud, bribery, and illegal arms transactions spanning 15 years. If these are authentic, and initial analysis suggests they are, several major defense contractors have serious exposure to federal investigation. An appraiser specializing in rare books examined the collection and estimated its value at $40 million alone. The total came to $287 million. Henry's estimate had been low. Marcus sat in Rivera's office as she laid out the strategy. "Here's where we are. The Garrison family claims their father owned this collection, that Henry stole it. We counter that Henry was a whistleblower who preserved evidence of corporate fraud, and that the collection itself was purchased with illegal money, which means it never legally belonged to Garrison Sr. in the first place. Will that work? If we can prove the fraud, the ledgers help. But we need corroboration. Witnesses. Documentation from that era. Most of those people are dead. Not all of them. I've found 3 former employees of Garrison Industries who worked there in the late 70s and early 80s. They're willing to testify for immunity. They have their own stories about what that company was doing." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "So we're not just defending my inheritance. We're prosecuting their father." "Essentially, yes. It's the only way to defeat their claim. We prove the collection was fruit of illegal activity, which means they have no legitimate ownership claim. It all reverts to you as the rightful inheritor from a whistleblower. They're going to come at me hard." Rivera nodded. "They already are. Your family's testimony will be part of their strategy. They'll paint you as unstable, unreliable, someone who manipulated a dying man. We need to be ready for that." "I am. Are you?" Rivera's eyes were sharp, not unkind. "Marcus, they're going to put your PTSD on trial. Your divorce. Your estrangement from family. Every hard moment you've lived through since coming home. They'll twist it into evidence that you're not competent to handle this inheritance." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Sergeant, lying at his feet, pressed his weight against Marcus's leg. "Let them try," Marcus said finally. "I've survived worse than my family's opinions of me." The day of the hearing arrived cold and clear. Marcus drove to the county courthouse in Kalispell with Sergeant in the passenger seat. Rivera had argued successfully for the dog to be present as a service animal, and the judge had allowed it. The courtroom was surprisingly full. Local media, curious townspeople, and in the front row on the plaintiff's side, James Garrison, flanked by 3 attorneys who looked like they charged $1,000 an hour. On Marcus's side, Rivera, looking sharp in a gray suit and an empty bench behind them. No family, no supporters, just Marcus and Sargent. It was enough. Judge Barbara Hendricks entered, a woman in her mid-60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she suffered fools poorly. She reviewed the motions in front of her, then looked up. This is a preliminary hearing to determine custody of property currently held by Marcus Webb, inherited from Henry Caldwell. Mr. Garrison's family claims the property was stolen. Mr. Webb claims it was legally inherited. We're here to establish which claim has merit. Mr. Caldwell, for the plaintiff. The lead attorney for Garrison stood, a polished man named Bradford Sinclair. Your Honor, this is straightforward. Henry Caldwell was employed by Garrison Industries from 1968 to 1982. In March of 1982, he absconded with corporate property, art, documents, materials purchased and owned by the company. He was never prosecuted because the company chose to handle it internally, but the theft is documented. Mr. Webb is now in possession of stolen goods. Ms. Rivera? Rivera stood. Your Honor, we dispute that characterization entirely. Henry Caldwell was not a thief. He was a whistleblower. The materials he took were evidence of massive corporate fraud, illegal arms deals, bribery of federal officials, and tax evasion. He preserved that evidence. As for the art collection, it was purchased using funds obtained illegally. The Garrison family has no legitimate ownership claim to proceeds of criminal activity. Judge Hendricks's eyebrow rose slightly. That's a serious accusation. We have serious evidence, Your Honor, documented in ledgers maintained by Mr. Caldwell over 15 years. We're prepared to present that evidence. Sinclair interjected smoothly. Your Honor, these alleged ledgers are unverified. They could be fabrications. We've seen no authentication, no corroboration. We have 3 witnesses prepared to testify, Rivera cut in. Former employees of Garrison Industries who will corroborate the fraud documented in those ledgers. The courtroom stirred. Garrison's face went carefully neutral. Judge Hendricks raised a hand for silence. This hearing is to determine custody of the property pending full trial. I'm not going to resolve questions of fraud and whistleblowing today. What I need to know is, does Mr. Webb have a legitimate legal claim to the inheritance, or is he in possession of stolen property? She looked at Marcus directly. Mr. Webb, please stand. Marcus stood. Sargent rose with him, calm and steady. You inherited this property from Henry Caldwell. Yes, Your Honor. Did you have a prior relationship with him? No, Your Honor. He was my neighbor. We spoke a few times. He asked the hospital to call me before he died, and he transferred the property to me legally. Why do you think he chose you? Marcus hesitated. The truth felt too raw, too personal for a courtroom. But Rivera had told him, be honest. Let them see who you are. He told me it was because I had a good dog, Marcus said quietly. Because I was kind to neighbors when I had no reason to be. Because I understood what it meant to be thrown away by the people who should have protected you. Silence in the courtroom. He said the property needed someone who'd protect it, Marcus continued. Not exploit it. Someone who knew loss. Judge Hendricks studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Garrison. Mr. Garrison, your father has been deceased for 10 years. In that time, did your family ever attempt to locate this alleged stolen property? Garrison shifted. We believed it was lost, Your Honor. But you didn't file a police report in 1982 when it allegedly disappeared. It was a private matter. A private matter worth nearly $300 million. The judge's tone was dry. That's quite a lot of money to write off without involving law enforcement. Sinclair stood. Your Honor, my client's father chose to handle it internally to avoid public scandal. Or because reporting it would have exposed illegal activity. Rivera interjected. That's speculation, Sinclair shot back. It's a theory we're prepared to prove at trial, Rivera countered. Judge Hendricks held up her hand again. Enough. Here's my ruling. The property remains in Mr. Webb's custody pending full trial. However, nothing is to be sold, moved, or altered. The court will appoint an independent appraiser and authenticator to examine everything in the vault. We'll reconvene in 60 days for a full evidentiary hearing. She looked at both sides. And let me be clear. If I find evidence that either party has attempted intimidation, witness tampering, or any other improper conduct, I will sanction you so hard you'll wish you'd never filed this suit. Understood. Both sides nodded. Good. We're adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Marcus breathed in cold mountain air. It tasted like victory. Not complete. The war was far from over, but a battle won. Rivera joined him on the steps. You did well in there. So did you. 60 days, she said. They'll use that time to dig. To find anything they can use against you. Be ready. I will be. She glanced at Sargent, who sat calmly at Marcus's side. He really did choose you because of your dog, didn't he? Marcus scratched behind Sargent's ears. Henry understood something most people don't. A man's character isn't in what he says or what he owns. It's in who stays loyal to him when he has nothing left to offer. Rivera smiled slightly. See you in 60 days, Marine. Don't do anything stupid. No promises. Marcus drove back to the cabin as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Sargent dozed in the passenger seat, content. For the first time since inheriting the property, Marcus felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Not the naive kind. The hard-won kind. The kind built on preparation, evidence, and the knowledge that he was fighting for something right. The Garrison family would come at him again. His own family would probably testify against him. The next 60 days would be brutal. But Marcus Webb had held positions under fire before. He'd protected his squad when the world was exploding around them. He'd survived wounds that should have killed him. A courtroom? A few lawyers? A family that never believed in him? He could handle that. Because this time, he had something they didn't. The moral high ground, a loyal dog, and the ghost of Henry Caldwell backing him from beyond the grave. The cabin appeared through the trees, lights glowing warm in the windows. Home. Marcus parked and let Sargent out. The dog stretched, then trotted to the porch, tail wagging. Come on, boy, Marcus said. Let's check on our treasure. Together, they descended into the vault. Marcus walked slowly through the chamber, touching the crates, the paintings, the ledgers that held the truth about men who'd thought they were untouchable. We're going to win this, he whispered. Not because we're stronger or richer or better connected. Because we're right. And because you found it when no one else could. Sargent's tail swept across the concrete floor. Above them, the Montana night deepened. Stars appeared one by one. The forest settled into darkness. And in that sealed chamber beneath a forgotten cabin, a veteran and his dog stood guard over a secret that was about to change everything. The battle lines were drawn. The war had begun. But this time, Marcus Webb wasn't running. He was holding his ground. And heaven help anyone who tried to take it from him. The 60 days moved like a glacier, slow, grinding, inevitable. Marcus fell into a routine that would have looked like paranoia to anyone who didn't understand military discipline. Up before dawn. Perimeter check. Maintenance on the cabin's defenses. Documentation work in the vault. Physical training to keep his body sharp and his mind from spinning into the dark places it wanted to go. Sargent shadowed him through all of it. The dog's presence a constant reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Rivera called every 3 days with updates. The authentication process was proceeding. The art historian had requested, and been granted, permission to physically examine 3 pieces, including the Vermeer study. The forensic accountant was building a timeline of Garrison Industries' illegal transactions. The 3 former employees had been deposed, and their testimony was damning. We're building an airtight case, Rivera said during one call. But you need to prepare yourself for what's coming at the hearing. They're deposing your family. Marcus had known it was coming. Still, hearing it out loud hit differently. What are they saying? Your ex-wife claims you were volatile during the marriage, that you had violent outbursts, that you threatened her. That's a lie, Marcus said flatly. I never. I know. But she's saying it under oath. Your brother claims you've been unstable since discharge, that you've made poor financial decisions, that you're paranoid. Your mother. Rivera paused. Your mother says you've been different since coming home, that you're not the son she remembers, that she fears for your judgment. Marcus closed his eyes. Sargent pressed against his leg, sensing the pain. They're destroying me to get money they have no right to. They're desperate, Rivera corrected. That's different. Desperate people make mistakes. Your ex-wife's testimony includes claims she never made during the divorce. Your brother's describing behavior that doesn't match your service record or any documented incidents. They're overplaying their hand. Will the judge see that? Judge Hendricks is smart. She'll see it. But Marcus, it's still going to hurt. Are you ready to hear your family testify that you're unfit? He looked down at Sargent. The dog's brown eyes were steady, patient, full of a loyalty that had never wavered. I've been preparing for that my whole life, Marcus said quietly. I just didn't know it. 3 weeks before the hearing, Marcus got a visitor he didn't expect. He was splitting wood behind the cabin when Sergeant alerted. Not with the aggressive stance that meant danger, but the curious, uncertain posture that meant unfamiliar, but possibly okay. Marcus set down the axe and waited. A car appeared, old, a Honda Civic with a dented bumper. It parked, and a woman got out. Late 30s, wearing jeans and a canvas jacket, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Marcus Webb, she called out. Depends on who's asking. My name is Sarah Caldwell. Henry was my uncle. Marcus's hand tightened on the axe handle. Henry said he had no family. He said he had no family worth claiming. Sarah corrected, walking closer. Her movements were careful, non-threatening. Sergeant watched her, but didn't growl. There's a difference. She stopped about 15 feet away, respecting the distance. Can we talk? I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because I heard about the lawsuit, and there are things you need to know. Marcus studied her. She had Henry's eyes, same color, same expression of careful assessment. 5 minutes, he said. They sat on the porch, Sergeant between them, the dog's presence a buffer. Sarah pulled out a worn photo album. Henry was my father's brother, she began. They had a falling out in the early 80s. My dad thought Henry was being paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere. They stopped speaking. Henry moved to Montana, and we let him go. She opened the album. Photos of a younger Henry, smiling in ways Marcus had never seen. Family picnics. Holiday gatherings. A life before isolation. I didn't understand it then, Sarah continued. I was just a kid. But as I got older, I started asking questions. My dad wouldn't talk about it. Said Henry had made his choices. What changed? My father died 5 years ago. Cancer. Before he went, he told me the truth. Henry hadn't been paranoid. He'd been right. The company he worked for, Garrison Industries, had threatened him. Told him if he ever spoke about what he knew, they'd destroy his family. So Henry cut contact to protect us. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He left his family to keep them safe. Yes. Sarah's eyes were bright, with unshed tears. And we thought he'd abandoned us. For 40 years, we thought he just didn't care. She pulled an envelope from her jacket. When I heard about the lawsuit, I went through my father's papers. I found this. A letter Henry sent right before he disappeared. My dad never opened it. I think he was too angry. Marcus took the envelope. The seal was broken now, but carefully, recently. Inside was a single page in Henry's neat handwriting. Brother, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I wish I could explain why, but the explaining would put you in danger. Please trust that I'm protecting you. Protecting Sarah. Protecting everyone I care about. I've done something that powerful men will never forgive. I've taken evidence of their crimes, and I've hidden it where they'll never find it. Someday, that evidence will matter. Someday, someone will use it to bring truth to light. When that day comes, I hope you'll understand. I hope you'll forgive me. Tell Sarah I love her. Tell her I never stopped thinking about her, even when I couldn't be there. I'm sorry. For everything. H. Marcus read it twice. His throat tightened. He gave up everything. His whole life. To do the right thing. And to keep us safe, Sarah said. The Garrisons never knew he had family. He made sure of that. He erased himself completely. She looked at Marcus. You inherited more than property. You inherited his mission. His purpose. I know. Then you need this. She handed him a second envelope. Evidence my father kept. He didn't understand what it meant, but he couldn't throw it away. Letters from Henry's lawyer. Documents showing the Garrisons tried to have Henry declared mentally incompetent in 1981 before he disappeared. Tried to seize his assets. Claim he was delusional. Marcus opened the envelope. Legal documents. Medical evaluations. Clearly purchased, clearly fraudulent. Declaring Henry Caldwell paranoid, delusional, a danger to himself and others. This is proof, Marcus said. Proof they've used this tactic before. They did it to Henry. Now they're doing it to you. Sarah met his eyes. Don't let them win. I won't. She stood to leave, then paused. Henry died alone. I hate that. But knowing he left everything to someone who'd fight for it, that helps. She looked at Sergeant. And he was right. A man with a dog like that. Loyal, steady. That's a man who understands what matters. After she drove away, Marcus sat on the porch with the documents in his lap. Sergeant pressed against him, offering silent comfort. He gave up everything, Marcus whispered. his family, his life, his identity, all to protect the truth. Sergeant's tail moved slowly across the porch boards. I won't let that sacrifice be for nothing, boy. I promise. Marcus called Rivera immediately. She arrived the next morning with her associate, and they spent 6 hours reviewing Sarah's evidence. When they finished, Rivera was smiling, a rare, fierce expression. This changes everything, she said. We can prove pattern of behavior. The Garrisons tried to discredit Henry the same way they're trying to discredit you. And we have contemporaneous documentation, documents created 40 years ago, before you were even born. They can't claim we fabricated it. Will it be enough? Combined with everything else? Yes. Marcus, I think we're going to win this. The final hearing arrived on a cold morning in March. Marcus wore his dress uniform, the one he'd kept for military funerals and occasions that demanded respect. Rivera had suggested it. Let them see who you are, she'd said. Let the judge see you're not the unstable veteran they're trying to paint. The courtroom was packed. Media in the back rows. Townspeople who'd followed the story. And in the front row on the plaintiff's side, the Garrison family, their battalion of lawyers, and Marcus's stomach clenched, his mother, his brother David, and his ex-wife Jennifer. They wouldn't meet his eyes. Judge Hendricks entered. This is the evidentiary hearing for Garrison Family Trust versus Marcus Webb. We're here to determine final disposition of property currently held by Mr. Webb, inherited from Henry Caldwell. I've reviewed all submitted evidence. We'll begin with witness testimony. The Garrisons went first. James Garrison took the stand and told his version. Henry Caldwell had been a trusted employee who'd betrayed that trust, stealing valuable property. The family had tried to handle it quietly, privately, to avoid scandal. But now, justice demanded the property be returned. Under Rivera's cross-examination, he faltered. Mr. Garrison, you claim this collection was purchased legally by your father? Yes. Yet none of it appears in corporate records. None of it was declared for tax purposes. How do you explain that? My father valued privacy. Privacy or tax evasion? Objection, Sinclair called. Overruled, Judge Hendricks said. Answer the question, Mr. Garrison. My father was a private man. He didn't feel the need to report personal collections. Rivera pulled out the ledgers. According to these records, your father purchased a Monet painting in 1979 for $2.3 million. That purchase was made using funds transferred from a Swiss account, an account funded by kickbacks from illegal arms sales. Did your father report that painting to the IRS? Garrison's jaw tightened. I have no knowledge of my father's tax filings. Convenient. Rivera smiled thinly. No further questions. Next came Marcus's family. His mother took the stand, and his heart broke a little more with each word she spoke. Marcus has struggled since coming home from the war. He's not the same. He's isolated, paranoid. He won't accept help. We're worried about him. Do you believe he's capable of managing a significant inheritance? Sinclair asked gently. I don't know. I want to believe he is, but his behavior suggests otherwise. Jennifer went further. Marcus was volatile during our marriage. He'd have episodes, nightmares, flashbacks. I was afraid of him. When I heard he'd inherited millions, I feared what he might do with that kind of power. David completed the portrait. My brother needs help, not money. He's living alone in the mountains with only a dog for company. That's not stable. That's concerning. Rivera's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Webb, did your son ever physically harm you? No, but did he ever threaten you? Not directly, but his moods. Yes or no, Mrs. Webb? No. Ms. Cole, you divorced your husband. During those proceedings, did you ever file for a restraining order? Jennifer hesitated. No. Did you ever call the police about his alleged volatility? No, because it never happened, did it? You're testifying to fear you never actually experienced because the Garrison family's lawyers suggested it would help their case. Objection. Sinclair stood. Withdrawn, Rivera said smoothly. No further questions. Then came the defense witnesses. The 3 former Garrison Industries employees testified to fraud, bribery, illegal deals. The forensic accountant walked through the ledgers, explaining each transaction, each illegal payment. The art historian authenticated 3 pieces as genuine, with the Vermeer study confirmed as period-appropriate and likely authentic, a discovery worth $50 million alone. And finally, Sarah Caldwell testified. She told Henry's story, his sacrifice, his isolation, the threats he'd faced, the life he'd given up to protect truth and family. My uncle spent 40 years alone, she said, voice breaking. He did that to keep us safe. And when he was dying, he gave everything to someone he trusted to protect it. Someone loyal, someone good, someone who wouldn't exploit it. She looked at Marcus. He chose right. Judge Hendricks called a recess. Marcus stood in the hallway, Sergeant at his side, when his mother approached. "Marcus," she said softly. "I don't." His voice was flat. "You made your choice in there. We were trying to help. We thought. You thought if you testified against me, the garrisons would cut you in. Admit it." Her silence was answer enough. "I'm your son," Marcus said quietly. "I serve my country. I came home broken, and instead of helping me heal, you made me feel like I was the problem. And now, when I finally have something good, something that could change my life, you try to take it away." "Marcus, please. I don't have a family anymore," he said. "I have a dog, and that's enough." He walked away. She didn't follow. When court reconvened, Judge Hendricks spoke for 20 minutes. She systematically dismantled the Garrison family's case. She cited the evidence of fraud, the pattern of intimidation, the attempts to discredit both Henry and Marcus using the same tactics. Henry Caldwell was a whistleblower, she said. He preserved evidence of significant corporate fraud. The collection he amassed was purchased with illegal funds, which means the Garrison family never had legitimate ownership. Mr. Caldwell's decision to leave this property to Mr. Webb was legal, appropriate, and in keeping with his clear intention that it be protected. She looked at Marcus. "Mr. Webb, you are the rightful owner of all property inherited from Henry Caldwell. The Garrison family's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering that the ledgers documenting corporate fraud be turned over to federal authorities for investigation." The gavel fell. Silence. Then pandemonium. Marcus stood frozen, unable to process it. Sergeant pressed against him, tail wagging. Rivera grabbed his arm. "We won. Marcus, we won." He looked across the courtroom at his family. His mother was crying. David looked stunned. Jennifer's face was stone. They'd lost. He'd won. But victory tasted like ash. Outside, spring snow was falling. Light, soft, the kind that melted as soon as it touched ground. Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in cold air, Sergeant at his side. Rivera joined him. "What are you going to do now?" Marcus thought about the vault, the paintings, the ledgers, the $287 million inheritance that was fully, legally his. "Donate most of it," he said. "The Vermeer and the most valuable pieces go to museums. The rest gets sold, and the money goes to veterans organizations, mental health services, housing programs, things that actually help. And you? I'll keep enough to restore the cabin, make it livable, maybe turn part of the property into a retreat, a place where veterans can come when they need quiet, when they need space, when they need to remember they're not broken." Rivera smiled. "Henry would approve." "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "I think he would." 6 months later, the cabin barely resembled the structure Marcus had first seen. He'd rebuilt the porch, replaced the roof, added solar panels, and a modern heating system. The windows were new, but he'd kept the original logs, honoring what Henry had built. The vault remained sealed. Most of its contents had been moved to museums and auction houses, generating the funds Marcus needed for his plans. But he'd kept one piece, the small portrait Henry had hidden deepest, a painting of a young woman with sad, knowing eyes. It hung above the fireplace now, watching over the space. Veterans came to the property throughout the summer. Some stayed a few days, others a few weeks. Marcus asked nothing of them. No payment, no explanations, no timelines. Just offered space, quiet, and the understanding that came from shared experience. Sergeant greeted each new arrival with the calm assessment of a dog who'd seen everything. Some veterans the dog warmed to immediately. Others he watched carefully. Marcus trusted his judgment completely. Sarah Caldwell visited in July. She walked through the cabin with tears in her eyes. "He'd be so proud," she whispered. "You honored him." "I tried." She touched the portrait above the fireplace. "Who is she?" "I don't know. There's no documentation. But Henry kept her closest to him. I think maybe she meant something once. Maybe she was why he stayed good," Sarah said, "when he could have become bitter." Marcus thought about that later, sitting on the porch with Sergeant as the sun set behind the mountains. About staying good when the world made it hard. about loyalty and sacrifice, about the strange inheritance that had saved his life. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is David. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not believing in you. For testifying against you. For not being the brother you deserved. You don't have to forgive me. I just needed to say it." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Sargent pressed against his leg, warm and solid. Finally, Marcus typed back, "I'm not ready to forgive, but I appreciate you saying it. Maybe someday." It wasn't closure. It wasn't healing, but it was a start. The stars emerged one by one, filling the Montana sky with light. Sargent dozed beside him, the dogs breathing slow and content. Inside the cabin, the portrait of the unknown woman seemed to smile in the firelight. Marcus Webb had come to this mountain broken, discarded, with nothing but a loyal dog and a dead man's gift. He'd been tested by greed, by family, by his own demons. And he'd won, not because he was stronger or smarter or luckier, because when it mattered most, he'd had Sargent by his side. And he'd understood what Henry Caldwell had spent his life protecting. That truth matters. That loyalty matters. That some things are worth more than money or blood or convenience. "Good boy," Marcus whispered, scratching behind Sargent's ears. Good boy." The dog's tail thumped once against the porch boards. And in that moment, beneath the vast Montana sky, Marcus understood something profound. He'd come to this mountain looking for a second chance. Instead, he'd found a purpose. A family, not of blood, but of loyalty. And a peace he'd thought was lost forever. The cabin lights glowed warm in the darkness. Veterans slept safely inside, healing in the silence. And on the porch, a man and his dog stood guard over something more valuable than any painting, any fortune, any inheritance. They guarded hope. And that, Marcus knew, was worth more than $250 million. That was worth everything. If this story moved you, if Marcus and Sargent's journey touched your heart, take a moment to let me know. Comment below about loyalty, about second chances, about the bonds that can't be broken. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories that honor veterans, that celebrate loyalty over blood, subscribe so you never miss another tale from these mountains. Because somewhere out there, another story is waiting. Another veteran. Another dog. Another truth buried deep, waiting to rise into the light.